Hi, everybody. Hopefully you've been watching Soufra and you've been moved by the story there. BOFA is a film festival that always tries to not just get great movies to show to people, but also have a conversation about those to say, what does it mean for us? What do we learn from this, and what are the messages? And I'm delighted today to have Kim Seagram and a very august panel of folks who are going to try and unpack a little bit some of the messages from Soufra. So if I may, I'll pass across to Kim to introduce everybody.
Thanks, Owen, and thanks very much for inviting us here today to discuss an incredibly exciting film and a really heartwarming film. I think it was a film, although chosen well ahead of time, really suits the time in which we're in right now. There's a lot of parallels. But first, I'd like to introduce our very august panel. I'm Kim Seagram from Ferment Tasmania, which is an organization set to set Tasmania and Australia up as the center of fermentation globally. Fermentation, for those of you who don't know, is the wonderful alchemy that transforms a primary product into a value-added product through some fabulous microbes, yeast and bacteria predominantly, but some fungi as well. Unlike that nasty little microbe that's taking over the world right now, known as the COVID-19 virus. Anyway, today we have in front of us Sandy, if you don't mind waving, Sandy. Sandra Murray is an incredible gal. She is with the University of Tasmania, and I call her our Queen of Food Justice. And she really is an absolute advocate for ensuring that the entire community and the entire planet has access to good, healthy food. The next person we have on the panel is Robin Koterski-Barnes. You'll also probably detect a note from her as well. She's from the other side of the planet, as am I, just a little further south from where I'm from. Robin actually is leading the future of food production training in Tasmania through the University College, through the associate degrees in aquaculture and fermentation. And last but not least is the gorgeous Claire Beale, who's well prepared with quarantini in hand and refills. So I think we may get her to speak earlier rather than later.
That's a good idea. Dogs.
She is the doyen of Design Tasmania and curator of all the best parts of Tasmanian and Australian design. And the thing that I love about Claire is it's not just all esoteric, isn't this beautiful? She actually really loves real world applications. So she's a girl after my own heart. Now, I'd really like to explore some of the incredible themes in the movie, and maybe I'll just set up a few of the things that I found in the film itself before I actually go into the questions that we've I want to ask the panel. But Soufra, a fantastic documentary by Susan Sarandon about a refugee camp in Beirut that was set up in 1948, housing Palestinian refugees. And it's really incredible to see how these women are almost in a quasi-lockdown themselves, and the way they actually get out of that lockdown and create a future for themselves is actually through the incredible food that they create and the community around the food that they create and the business that they end up creating from that fabulous food. And I also really like the themes of that cultural acceptance through food as well. And I also, Claire, loved the way the food led to design and how the fabulous painting of the walls and then the beautiful designs that went on the plain painting of the walls. And it was all this sort of real natural progression to take a place out of a very dour and desperation to make it just something a little bit better. Also personally, because I've been very involved in the Harvest Launceston Farmers Market, was very excited to see the girls actually take their food to the farmers market as that next big cultural step in the development of their business. The thing that I loved most about it, however, was the symbols of hope and how these women were actually showing other women how they could actually really empower their lives through food and through working together. So on that note, Sandy, I'd like to throw the first question to you. Like the challenges these women faced in the refugee camp, how do you think we should support our local food systems during the COVID and as we emerge from isolation? And what would you like to see as your perfect world of food justice and equity going forward post-COVID? And I'm really sorry about this because it's a very big question, but feel free to break it down into chunks and answer the bits that you want.
Thanks, Kim, and apologies if you can hear the lawnmower because my partner's just decided to mow the lawn.
The joys of Zoom.
Yeah, big question, food justice. So let me just break down how I would define food justice. So food justice for me is not just about feeding the world. It's not just about putting food on the table. It's more than that. So if you think to yourselves in your families, in your household, well, what does it take to put good, healthy food that's culturally appropriate on the table for yourselves and your family every day? It requires a lot of things to take place, enough money, whether you've got a kitchen, whether you've got the utensils, whether you've got food that's accessible to you through shops. So there's a whole bunch of things that need to align to allow you to put food on the table every day. So for me, food justice is, I often talk about a rights-based approach to having enough food or adequate food, which for me is what food justice is. So Australia is a signatory to the United Nations Human Rights Declaration on the rights to food. Not that we enact it, but we are a signatory. And what a rights-based approach means to me is that we recognise that food security or having food on the table every day is really important, but you can't have it without participation. So everyone from every sector of the community, including our vulnerable, our people living in poverty, through to those of us middle class, to those of us who have ample amounts of money. So we all need to participate in the decision making. There needs to be accountability. It needs to be non-discriminatory. It needs to be transparent. So everyone knows what's happening with our food system. So everyone has a say. Everyone can see what's happening. There needs to be some dignity involved. So human dignity. People can't be seen to need to be relying on emergency food relief all the time, because that's not dignity. People need to be empowered, such as the women in the Soufra movie. And in essence, the right to basic foods is a rule of law if we were to abide by the United Nations declaration around this. But I think what really holds out for me, looking at the Soufra movie and what I can see moving forward here in Tasmania during COVID and post-COVID, is we need legitimate and authentic participation from all sectors of the community. We need accountability. We need transparency, and we need to see some human dignity around the food system. So for me, the goal is a food system that is local and is just. So a just food system is what I'm hoping for now and into the future. So what that looks like, I think, is up to us as a community and a society here in Tasmania. But
so do you
really is the key. Sorry, Kim.
Yeah. So do you think having a leader, somebody like a Miriam, who can actually take that sector of the community and drive it, as opposed to being driven inside or outside? What's your preference?
Oh, it has to be driven from the inside up. It can't be we do-gooders who think, oh yeah, we're going to help them do what we think needs to be done in their community. It does have to be driven from within the community upwards, with support from people who can support. But it's got to be part of that community's initiative, and it's got to be driven from the ground up. Otherwise, it just won't work. And I liken, I often look at the community garden over at Windsor Park at in Riverside in Launceston, and it's a great community garden area, but I'm not seeing as much community driving it as I would like to. So, and because maybe it's probably a council-driven initiative. So there needs to be kind of a balance between community and who's supporting an initiative, but community first and foremost.
Fantastic, fantastic. And how do you think we can really create that culture of, you know, finding those champions in these communities that actually need access and need skill development, you know, even preparing the food, to really empower that community and that next generation?
I think we already know them. I think we already know who they are. I think about the Denise Dolphins of the world at Northern Suburbs Community Centre. I think of Nettie Burr over at Starting Point Neighbourhood House. I think about Pete, who runs the community garden over at Ravenswood. So I think we already know who those stars are out there, and it's giving them the opportunity to be able to coalesce everyone together to actually support a community-driven initiative. So I think we already have our answer. It's about getting the glue to actually stick it together to move forward.
So this opportunity to collaborate, to join all the dots, to join the people who have the produce, who have the skills and things like that, to actually almost create a coalition of the willing.
Yeah, correct. And I think there just needs to be an opportunity to bring everyone together and come up with that project idea and then move forward with it and make it happen.
Okay. And we'll be talking about an opportunity to bring a number of projects together a little bit later. But next, what I'd like to do is ask Robin a little bit. Robin, how do you shape this sort of utopian vision of food justice and equal access to nutritious food going forward? And where does formal training come in? You know, how do you get people becoming part of the food system and becoming part of the solution?
Okay. Well, I think to help shape that vision is really through sharing and collaboration. And I think we're actually seeing a lot more of that now that we're in this COVID isolation. You know, people are willing not only to share their excess produce, but also their knowledge and skills of what to do with that produce. They're more willing to help out their neighbors, you know, just asking their neighbors if they need anything from the shop. You know, that side, all of that makes us to be more community focused. And I think that's really important to helping with the food justice and equal access and that vision. I also think we need to really name up and make people aware, because not everybody is aware that not everyone has equal access. And by allowing people to know that, then we can start to make change. You know, in every city across the world, there's areas of disadvantage, and, you know, Launceston isn't any different to any other city anywhere else. But I think that's also where the formal training comes in, and that's really important. We need to make sure that our local people have skills that are needed to create change. The more people you have that have training and education and that are actually informed, they can start to enact change. And I think this is on both the whole of industry, so if you want to talk about the food industry, but also on an individual level. So on an industry level, if you educate the more people, it lifts the whole industry. But on an individual level, you know, you can start to see empowerment and change. And I'm thinking about some of the students I've had over the last couple of years at the university college, and in particular, some of our mature age students who never thought they were going to study. They didn't think it was for them, and they just got up the courage to enroll. And then, you know, over the course of a year or 2 years, you see their confidence growing, and you see it changing them. But it's not just changing them, it's allowing them to change their lives, but by doing that, they're changing their families' lives and their neighbors' lives. And it's really about the confidence that they're gaining through that allows them to enact change for themselves and their family or their employer or their industry.
Yeah, Robin, and the thing that I love about what you're doing with the University College with both aquaculture and fermentation, you know, you're really playing to the strengths of the region. And I guess there was a bit of one cringe moment in the movie that I found when I was watching, and they had gone to that fabulous cooking school, and they were all sitting there learning. And the guy was showing them how to press little rings out of white bread to put salmon on top. And I thought, oh my God, you know, rather than all this beautiful food, you know, Palestinian, Syrian, and, you know, Lebanese food that they were creating, all of a sudden they're creating this little
white bread sandwiches.
Smoked salmon ring. And I'm thinking, oh, and that was the only time in the movie that I had a bit of cringe, because it almost counterculturally what they stood for. So do you want to tell everybody a little bit about what the University College is doing with those two courses and how you chose those two themes?
Well, they were actually, they were created based on industry demand. So there are two really exciting sectors in Tasmania. So obviously aquaculture is one of our largest industries, and the other is fermentation. And it's really an innovative industry. And so there was a need, and the University College created these courses before I came into the role that I'm in now. But we work with industry. We work with local industry to make sure that we're teaching the skills that are needed in that industry, and that you're not, that, you know, the students are coming out and they're ready to jump into that industry. They have work ready skills. And they do work placements and get to meet a lot of people within each of those respective industries throughout their course. So it's really about creating networks and collaboration for the students.
Fantastic. And it's not like, you know, creating a mango juice and then having to send them all the way to Queensland. They actually keep their skills and use them down here, which is so exciting.
Yeah, and we take a very science-based approach to it, because it is actually a science degree, an applied science degree.
And that's one of the things you do have to respect these food production systems, because they're an applied science. They are chemistry, they are microbiology, they are all of these things. You can learn all of these things while making a fabulous cheese, or dare I say, fermenting a herring. Not that we're doing that yet, but anyway. Listen, any idea how we can support these fabulous producers and our other local food systems during COVID, just to ensure that they still plant, grow, and make things, so that when we come out on the other end, we actually still have a really strong food culture? Any suggestions?
I think we buy locally and eat seasonally. People need to be learning about what's produced here and how to eat what's in season, how to preserve when produce isn't in abundance, and so we can use it later, and there isn't, we can reduce the food waste that we have. You know, I think we're seeing a real movement through this, where people who can really want to support local business and producers, and there's almost a sense of responsibility to do so. I think things like the online farmers market and the creation of a lot of online shops direct to from producers make it easy for people who can support to do so. So I think if people can keep on doing that, that will help see us through this.
Now, are we ever going to be able to get over that conundrum that people just want food for cheaper?
I mean, I think one thing.
Can we get them appreciating that to buy a really beautiful bit of food, you might have to pay a little bit more, but then use it just a little bit less?
Yeah, I think so. I think what I'm hearing in this, the people I'm talking to, is that, you know, they are going down those takeaway and those delivery options from local restaurants, and what they're talking about is how amazing the quality of the local food is, even through delivery, and appreciating that they can still have access to this.
Yeah. No, I think we're in a very lucky part of the world. It's the irony.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you and I particularly, with the accents from away. I I have always said that if the end of the world comes, you just have to be on this side of the Bass Strait. We'll pull up the drawbridge and we'll eat and drink ourselves silly. I didn't actually expect it to happen.
I'll drink to that.
Yeah. Cheers.
Now, Claire, before you get into your second quarantini,
Excellent. Good, perfect timing, Kim.
through design thinking,
Yes.
and for the wider audience, could you give us an elevator pitch of what design thinking is, so that we're all on the same page?
Sure.
But how do we use design thinking in our food businesses to value add, have a better environmental footprint,
All of those things.
innovate, just create that more sustainable model going forward?
Okay, well, what's been really interesting for me to follow thus far in the conversation is that what everyone here is really talking about is human-centered design. So design thinking comes from that space. It comes from a way of looking at the world and seeing the issues and problems that we're experiencing, and then trying to imagine a better, fairer, more equitable way to solve it. And so design thinking kind of works through an iterative cycle where you start with the idea of what is the problem or the thing that we desire, and then you work your way through prototyping and exploration of ideas to figure out what could be feasible, what could be viable. You test it, you go back to the drawing board. It's an ever-evolving process. So it is also about creating a space where any idea is okay. So there's no such thing as no when you're going through a design process. It's a what if and how about, rather than what aboutery. We're thinking about how could we, or why is the world like this? So in terms of thinking about having watched the film again today and really been touched by the agency that was being given to this group of incredibly amazing women who had this very simple question, which was, how do we improve our situation? How do we create a business or an income that can help us lift ourselves and our families and our community into a better way of living? And so from that very simple idea of, well, how could we do this, to here's something that we do really well, which is cooking. We can share that with people, and through the power of cooking and sharing our food, we can tell stories that break down some of those barriers. So what I was seeing in the progress of the film and the documentary, never mind the dude at the cooking school teaching them how to plate up salmon sandwiches. But the whole thing that I saw through there was them exploring different avenues of potential. So they were, first of all, just catering and delivering food to people within the camp area. Then they started looking at catering to schools and giving kids healthy lunches, which, as we know, if you start with kids and you give them access to good food and good systems of producing food, growing food, connecting to something that is culturally appropriate, healthy, all the things that we think are most important here in Tasmania, that is sowing the seed. Then they sort of worked through into the idea of catering private functions, and you could see the level of discomfort that some of them had in terms of going into these very wealthy homes and catering these functions. But then realizing that the audience were highly appreciative of their food and interested in the food and interested in talking to them. And I thought that raised the level of confidence. And then it sort of culminates in the whole journey of the up and down of the food truck and licensing and legality. And, that this for me this film has shown a hero's journey, but also a design story, which is, keep trying. The end goal was to create an income or an enterprise that was sustainable, that was connected to something you were passionate about, and that you were wanting to share with others. And so that was the guiding light of this is the idea that we have, and then all the solutions were being explored. So I think that was to me was one of the most exciting things. And so design coming into it as, an artifact, which was the graphics on the truck and the design of the truck and those sorts of things. That is a really important thing that we see in the design world as a that's the tangible product that people often connect design to. It's the thing, the object. At Design Tasmania, it's the stuff we have in the exhibitions often. But actually, the real design journey was happening way before then. And it was about the women at Soufra thinking about, you know, even having the conversation about how are we going to work within the truck? What size is the truck? What kind of things do we need in it? That's all systems thinking. That's sort of thinking about how are we going to manage our workflow? Who's best skilled to work in this space? Talking about the branding and the identity, and that's the dressing up that happens. But the real beauty in the design was thinking through, how do we get our food to an audience? And that was the vehicle was literally a vehicle, but there were other things that they explored before they got there.
Oh, thank you, Claire. That's fantastic. And it leads in really nicely to what I wanted to talk about next. And I know it hasn't been talked outside of our little group that has been working on it for a few months now.
Our secret society.
Sorry?
Our secret society.
Our secret society, yes. Society of very passionate foodies. But with everybody today, we'd love to share the fact that the City of Launceston and the Greater North is going to be putting in a bid to be recognized as one of the UNESCO Creative Cities. And the UNESCO Creative Cities has a whole bunch of different denominations, and I'll let Claire elaborate on those in a couple of seconds. But the bid that we want to put ours in is for a city of gastronomy and design. Now, gastronomy is not about looking at stars. It's actually about food. I just wanted to make that clear, because every time I say gastronomy, everybody looks at me very puzzled, thinking, don't you do food? What's this about stars? So yes, it's definitely all about food. But it's going to be that bit of glue that we've been talking about that's going to tie all of the different bits and pieces that we're working together in such fabulous parts of our community, and actually help us become recognized as one of the global centers of the production and appreciation of food. So Claire, because you've been involved in a bid before, would you like to,
And I'm still here.
I know, and you're still lived through it. Would you just like to tell everybody a little bit about the UNESCO Creative Cities and this sort of global network?
So in 2004, UNESCO came up with the idea of a Creative Cities Network. It's a concept that is about linking cities around the world in a network of creative output that fits within 7 different themes of creativity. One is crafts and folk art, and Ballarat is a city of folk art. Design, so Geelong in Victoria is a city of design. Film, gastronomy, literature, Melbourne is a city of literature, media, arts and music. And what these creative fields are aimed at is identifying, not necessarily to the exclusion of others, but identifying a creative community within a particular location that has opportunity to strengthen participation in cultural life, bring value back to the community, to its economy, to its education systems and so on. They're all linked back to the UNESCO Sustainable Development Goals, which is in there. You can look this up on the UNESCO website if you want to dive really deeply. But I mean, essentially, the Creative Cities Network is there to strengthen international cooperation. So cities that have creativity as a strategic part of their sustainable development. It's there to stimulate and enhance initiatives that are led by member cities to make creativity an essential part of urban development, production, distribution, those sorts of things. It's there to help foster and give a lever for partnerships between private and public, between government and members of the community and so on. It's also there to help, by having a Creative City designation, it actually helps to strengthen and highlight that there is creative production and activity happening in that space. So it's there to develop hubs around production. It's there to support and create opportunities for creators and professionals. And it's there to provide improved access to these things. And enjoy, you know, the cultural goods and services that are available to you. Most importantly, under the Sustainable Development Goals, it is there to ensure that, as we were talking about food justice, it's about access. So it's access for everyone, for vulnerable groups, for individuals, for those that we see as minorities. It is actually about ensuring that a creative cities activity creates access for everyone. And that also that when you have a creative cities designation, that creativity is seen as front and center into any local development strategy and planning. So that all sounds very wordy, but effectively what it means is it gives you recognition that a creative community within a city is one of the key drivers of enterprise, of activity, of business, of education, of production, of a whole lot of different things. And for us, we've identified that the incredibly strong food systems network in northern Tasmania, and particularly around Launceston, that is the creative cities driver that we really want to use and leverage and act on.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Now, one of the things that sits underneath, as we've been mentioning, these bids, is you have to have a series of major projects that you actually put forward, that you're going to put forward with your bid. And the thing that I loved about our first meeting, and girls, you'll probably agree with me here, was the fact that getting the denomination as a city of gastronomy became second to actually getting these projects up and running. Because we actually wanted to empower our community and wanted to do some really exciting things for the food culture in the community. And that gave me such confidence going forwards with this. So Sandy, what is the project you would like to see as one of the major projects for the City of Gastronomy bid? And at the end, do you want to talk a little bit about your conference in November? Oh,
Owen needs to unmute her.
Sandy's got no voice.
Oh dear.
And so does Robin.
Oh really?
Now Sandy has a voice.
There's Sandy. Yeah.
Here I am. Thanks very much, Kim. So what I can see evolving, particularly in the northern suburbs, both in around the Rochalie, Newnham area and also up in Ravenswood, is a project around social enterprise that includes permaculture principles, growing food, and actually distributing that food to people who otherwise can't get to the fruit and veg shop to actually buy their own fruit and veg. So I know there was discussion a year or so ago from Denise Delphin about buying a van to take fruit and veg around to those people who might want to buy some locally grown fruit and veg in some of the communities up in the northern suburbs. So there seems to be a project emerging around growing permaculture principles and then teaching others to grow food as well. So right now, Northern Suburbs Community Centres have provided the first permaculture design program to local community members to become permies, we call them for short, and then they can go on and teach other people how to grow stuff. But what that means is we've got all these people that know how to grow stuff, which means we can start growing lots to get it out to people who might want to go and to get access to locally grown food in their local communities. So potentially there's a van opportunity, plus there's a collaboration opportunity between the Ravenswood folk and northern suburbs. So we can actually start to evolve this growing network, which is pretty exciting. So for me, I see that as one of the gastronomy project bid opportunities from a social enterprise perspective.
Great. Great.
And I know there's lots of other ideas as well, Kim, but that was one that sort of comes from that food justice lens that I've been working with for the last few years.
And the one thing that I loved, we actually wanted to be able to put this out to the wider community, which we'll be doing in the next couple of months, seeking people with ideas for different projects that we can include in the bid. And then we'll have everybody voting and helping us choose which ones actually go into that bid process. Much like the project that Owen's running right now, which I'll mention in a few minutes too. But first I'll go over to Robin if she's got children under control. Nobody hitting each other over the head. Good.
No, they're fine. They're all outside.
From a training and skills perspective in the agri-food sector, what would you like to see from the bid? And don't be afraid to mention the university college courses.
Okay. You know, I think I touched on it a little bit earlier as well, but for our students, it's about collaboration with the projects that are going on with industry. It's about the creation of networks. It's about mentoring from people who are in industry and doing different projects, and not just in the fermentation space, because it goes into, you know, we've got courses on agribusiness and the aquaculture. You know, it's not just the fermentation degree here, but that real mentoring. Our students have amazing ideas about where they want to take their own careers, and really getting that, building their own networks is really important, because it allows, you know, you can work on a project for 6 months. You can work on, you can, you know, be part of a project, but creating a network will last you a lifetime. And I think that's really what I would like to see for these students, to be able to develop that network. And sorry, there's kids running in and out here.
That's okay, we're not used to it.
The dog. But yeah, I mean, to provide something that the students have to go on with afterwards. You know, it's just about opportunity and helping the students navigate their own careers, as well as they continue their training, but actually afterwards as well.
And it sounds like really embedding it in community and making sure that these kids, they get the training from you guys, but then they get embedded into the community, either through mentoring or through internships or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they actually come out with a job at the end too, which would be nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Having a 24-year-old who just got his first professional job as an engineer, I know just how important that is and how much you hang on hoping he's going to have a job at the end.
Yeah, I mean, a good mentor, I mean, for those who have had mentors, can help you change the direction of your career, you know, over a conversation. And it's so valuable. Sorry about the background noise.
We don't need to move that way.
Having a good mentor is so important for students and everyone, really. But yeah, those networks are really quite important, and that's what I'd like to see develop further than we already have.
And probably something that you've answered, and even in what you've just said, but like me, that we are both from away. What have you loved about Tasmania and the Tasmanian food culture being here?
Oh, yeah, so much. I mean, I love Tassie. I've been here for 18 years now, which probably says enough in itself. I haven't left. You know, I love the diversity of the state. You know, I've explored lots of Tassie. I've been really fortunate, you know, above on the land and under the water. And, you know, I love all of it. It's so beautiful. But I think the one thing about the food culture that really sticks with me here is, you know, the producers here are so open, and they're so happy to share their stories and, you know, about how to, you know, eat and drink and cook and create with their own, the ingredients that you're getting from the local producers. It allows you to become part of that culture. So you're not just going to a restaurant and eating what a fabulous chef can create. You can take it home and share those stories with your family and your friends and create something amazing and really become part of that culture. Fantastic. And that's not something I experienced before I moved here.
Fantastic. No, and like me, and it's that culture that that you're actually not just eating a pork roast. You're actually eating with Guy from Mount Norman.
Exactly.
You know, you're not just drinking a wine. You've got Franny and Shane from Delamere on the table with you. You know, it becomes more than just the product itself, and Claire, it becomes the stories behind it too.
Yeah, I think that the important thing that we are aware of with doing a UNESCO Cities bid is it's not about what we plan to do, but what already exists here. And you know, the thing for me, being a new arrival on this beautiful island, is that this community is so deeply connected and passionate, and as Robin said, really willing to tell stories about what they do and why they do it and why it's important to them and what they hope to achieve. And I think that that's the uniqueness about the Tasmanian brand, is that we're not out there shouting from the rooftops that we're awesome. We're quietly getting on with the extraordinary, and then people discover you. And for me, I've spent just over a year discovering all these great things in our local culture that I had never heard of before I moved here.
No, and that declared perfect, because I actually was very lucky when I moved here 28 years ago to start with working with the wine industry, which was in its infancy at that point in time. And we had a small vineyard that's now called Leaning Church. It was called La Gully. And I started working on the Vineyards Association of Tasmania, and did put their first marketing and communications arm together. And then ended up being the chief cook and bottle water on there. But the thing that I loved about it is all you had to do was put the product in front of the opinion makers, and it was there that people really stood up and took notice, because we had such good product that it was just a matter of putting it in front of the right people. And that's where you gain the respect, rather than doing all the big flashy ad campaigns and things like that. You know, I can remember our first Wine Australia, we went up to Sydney, and we borrowed an old Tourism Tasmania stand that I had never seen before, but it was being given to us for free. So who was I to look a gift horse in the mouth? Well, we ended up looking like we were serving in front of a prison.
That's an unfortunate design fail.
Yeah, large sandstone blocks kind of do that sort of thing to you.
Yeah.
But the fact that the industry was working so well together and actually serving each other's wines and chatting about each other's products and where everybody else was and who was friends with who, and and it was just the most beautiful thing. And from there on in, every time we went up for this major wine extravaganza for Australia, we were the most popular stand there. I also did travel with a large esky full of all sorts of yummy things to be able to do tastings, which helps too.
And it's really important to have that sense of how things fit together. But also the thing that strikes me about the creative community down here is the generosity of spirit. You know, if you are having trouble solving a problem, or how do I source a thing, you know, in our case, we're often working with furniture makers or product designers who are trying to solve a process or source a material. We can put the word out to our network, and within minutes you'll get someone coming back to you saying, yeah, here it is. This is the guy to ring, and here's his phone number, and oh, by the way, I'm heading down there in half an hour, I'll ask him for you. You know, that is unheard of in other parts of the world, but it is what makes us so unique and so strong. And the potential for us to really stand up on a world stage. I mean, we don't, you know, one of the interesting things that we deal with all the time is, should it matter? Does it matter? It depends in whose eyes it is that you want to measure this sort of stuff. But, you know, meanwhile, we're just quietly getting on with doing incredible things. And that's really heartening. And it just means that we're all lucky to be here. And we're also sometimes saying, you know, don't tell too many people. Just don't let the word get out too far, because I want to enjoy it first.
I know when I first arrived here, I thought, oh my God, what doesn't the rest of the world know about this place? And I sort of made it my mantra to get another, 500,000 people here. And it's just like, I kind of really like it the way it is. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'd tell you, but then I'd have to kill you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if this is a good point to actually ask a few of the participants in this conversation their views on these things. Is that appropriate in your agenda?
Yeah, and listen, I'd love to hear from everybody. I know how our panel's feeling, but what is the new normal after COVID when it comes to our food culture? Does anybody have any way how they see us going forward? Are we going to go into this wonderful sort of local circular economy, or are we just going to go back and let the multinationals and industrialized food systems take over?
Well, I think there's going to be a real place for community-based situations, and Tasmania is beautifully situated for that. Who would like to give their comments? Just put your hand up and I will unmute you. Thanks, Dee.
Thanks. Hello again. Good to see everybody. Very interesting conversation. But just observing from the film itself and then coming back to what you're doing is, I believe that Tasmania is really too affluent at this stage. Actually being able to, we haven't got the hunger or the need like these refugees had to actually succeed. I mean, the thing that I saw about the whole thing about the food argument was they had no plan B. It was plan A until you succeed. And I think that is something that we are lacking a little bit in Tassie. It's the people that, all the people are very enthusiastic, very good at putting out their ideas. But when I see the uni being involved and coming in, I seem to lose a lot of the community that actually don't have much to do with the university or food or, you know, unusual food or experiment. The good part about, I think, in Tasmania is the farmers markets and things like that, which is actually bringing people into another area of food appreciation. I don't know how you sort of, I mean, I think we get lots of kids coming through, and we had the Drysdale arguments sort of a few years ago that sort of died, and I don't know why, because we had students going all over the world and I found them in all sorts of weird and wonderful places. Now we don't. So I'm just wondering how we can get that feeling back into
Andy, sounds like a question for you.
Sorry, what was that?
I said it sounds like a question for you to answer.
Oh yeah, thanks, Owen. Thanks, Dee. I don't think we are too affluent. In fact, we've got a very high, well, certainly compared to
That's what I mean.
To the movie, we are an affluent country, but Tasmania compared to the rest of Australia, we have a very high incidence of food insecurity here in Tasmania, meaning people who struggle to put healthy food on the table every day. What I'm seeing though, and what has emerged over the last 10 years is less reliance on emergency food relief and people's expectations that if I put my hand up, I will get free food too. A more resilient community that's actually saying, look, I can do this for myself, and the community is rallying, particularly our vulnerable community folk in low-income areas. They're actually starting to build resilience of their own, growing their own, and I see that time is right for this conversation to happen. And what's, for me, going to be really interesting in the post-COVID era will be, it's a tricky balance, because what I see is there's this need for feeding the world's population via our export-orientated agri-food business, and we do that really well in Tassie. We export really great high-quality produce, but somehow we need to keep this food system, local food system we're creating. So that will be the trick. How do we create that and keep it here? So it's almost like we've got these two systems in parallel, but how can we maintain what we're creating at the same time, I guess, reestablish that export-orientated agribusiness that has worked for us in the past. But the question is, to what extent do we need that as well? So there's a few questions around that export-orientated agribusiness, what that might look like in the future, but also too, how do we keep going? How do we keep continuing to grow what we're doing during COVID-19? I guess is my thoughts around that. And for me, that's about participation from all sectors of the community to have their voices heard authentically.
Yeah, and we also have to understand that we have to get more value. We cannot, much like when we took our trees and just chipped them up and send them off as wood chips, we can't just continue to send fresh produce offshore. We can't just powder our fat, you know, some of the best dairy in the world and sell it off as a global commodity. We've got to make some of the best cheeses in the world. We've got to make some fabulous yogurts and other products. And through doing that, and through using the university, who are doing these associate degrees now, which actually makes it much easier. It's that step nearer, rather than farther of a full degree program, where people can actually start getting skills and then create this entrepreneurial culture where they create their own business because they have those skills, and then that business grows and they can hire more people. And we start pulling people up out of this food poverty to create an incredible food culture across the board, because all the great food cultures around the world, have shared almost their peasant food culture, and we now take it as ours. Look at the Italian food culture and the Greek food culture. Dee, wouldn't you agree? Whoop.
Put Dee back on.
Sorry, now you've got a voice.
Our biggest value here is our people. And I think we've got to try and get our people trained, as you said, but there needs to be more than just university type courses. It needs to be TAFE. There needs to be other things that actually grow the people's skills and interest in what they're doing. We don't want just sort of zombies.
Yeah, and Dee, one of the reasons I have the two women in front of you right now is the fact that these are two of the champions who are actually working closely with industry, who will be the ones who help pull the community into this culture. And it's when we find that next champion in TAFE, when we find those people, then we start creating a much broader food culture that really underpins everything we want to do going forward into the future.
It's just, I wanted to say, they need to want to be pulled.
Yes,
That's all.
But that's why we have to make it fun and exciting.
Exactly.
And if abject poverty won't be the thing that, you know, and Miriam's not doing it out of her necessarily destitute situation. She actually wants to empower a group of women. And it's a project for her, and she's getting incredible joy out of that project. And it's one of the things why I love doing it. And Robin, Sandy, and Claire, I'm sure you get the same joy out of empowering other people around you to create the culture that you want.
I think that one of the important things that I had that shock moment when I moved down here and realized the level of illiteracy in the adult population. And as I sort of experienced the next 6 months, started to understand why certain things work the way they do and why some things fail to launch that seem like really great ideas. And it all comes back to how well connected our community is and where we value things. So what's been really interesting in COVID is that people who are homeschooling their kids have had newfound appreciation for teachers, because teachers are suddenly seen as not just childminders, but they're actually being seen as people who are wizards at getting their children to concentrate and engage in learning and teach. And parents are starting to see that a lesson plan or a learning plan for the day is not just do all the tasks. It's actually about trying to find creative ways to get kids to want to learn.
And engage.
So I think that that's one really good element of what we're going to come out of with COVID, and for the design community as well. You know, we often get criticized for being the people that are purveyors of unaffordable, difficult to access products that are only ever going to cater for a particular echelon of people on a certain income level. But what the design community has been arguing amongst itself for probably about 30, 40 years now anyway, is that really good design can be affordable, and it can help empower people to change their lives. So when we start to think about the systems and models that we're putting in place, it's not about sending things all over the world. It's actually about making them locally accessible, locally adaptable, finding ways to work with the materials you have to hand, and giving people access to the ability to make and the ability to create and the ability to shift. So one of the things I hope to see coming out of COVID is that continued generosity of spirit, and also a valuing and an investment in the professions and in the industries that are being proven now to make our lives really valuable and worthwhile. I mean, what are the two things we're doing while we're in isolation? Eating and drinking. And we're also coming up with creative things to do. So once we've exhausted Netflix, it's like, what do we do now? Oh, I'll go make a thing or start
Go to BOFA. Go to BOFA.
Yeah, go to BOFA, watch a movie. Yeah, but the thing is, we're starting to understand that it's not a vanilla experience. There's actually lots of different pathways that you can go down.
And there's been a question that's come up, you know, a lot of people are really suffering through COVID and going to the supermarket to find those bargains. But actually through Harvest Launceston, you can actually get some really beautiful beef cuts for $10 a kilo. Yeah. Through Real Beef. You can get 10 kilos of potatoes for much cheaper than you get in the supermarket. So it's just a matter of not dare I say, being lazy and just going to Kohl's and things like that. Let's seek out. And now that we have, some people have a bit of time to do a little bit of that research, go online to the harvestmarketonline.org.au and do a little comparison shopping from Monday through to Wednesday, and see those bargains you find, and feel free to share those around too. Now, another question that came up was around migrant communities, and it would really be nice to be able to be more inclusive. I know the Inveresk Tavern was doing a fantastic Sunday where different migrant communities would come in and make meals to be able to share with the community, which is a lovely thing to do. But again, with the farmers market, we have brought a number of different cultural angles to our community by migrants who have come and wanted to feel a part of the place by sharing their food. And one of the first ones was Hide, who had his Osaka-san soul, and he shared his Japanese pancakes, his okonomiyaki, with us in the early days. And it was beautiful. We've had Yusuf with his Turkish tucker, which is now in a shop in town. We've got the Bolani with the Afghani community. Unfortunately, right now, it's such a shame because we can't have ready to eat on offer. But it was a way to really start weaving these communities and giving them pride in their food and their culture by sharing it with our community. So the more ways that we can do that, the better. And it's the way Festivali started off, wasn't it, Sandy? In those days when it was in the streets of Launceston and everybody just had those cultural things. And unfortunately, it's just sort of morphed into just a big food and wine fest, but that was the premise behind it. Sandy, are you working with any of those migrant communities on the food justice side of things?
No, I'm not. No, I'm not actually. It's more just through the Neighbourhood House Network is probably where I'm doing most of what I do. Yeah, and I guess some of the migrant communities are linked up with the Neighbourhood House Network anyway, but not a particular community per se.
Yeah. Now we're talking about Victorian meat processing plant COVID breakouts. I've been seeing the same thing happen in Canada and the US. It's one of the places, because everybody's jammed so closely together, that the virus seems to be transmitted fairly quickly. Plant-based diets are being more and more popular. Unfortunately, I'm not one of the people who can go to a strictly plant-based diet because I don't get enough iron. So it is definitely for the community that can. I love a very heavily vegetable-focused diet. I have a problem when you start creating a highly processed food to replace a hamburger or a hot dog, rather than just enjoying a hamburger or hot dog or a really beautiful vegetarian meal. So that's where my challenge comes in. Robin, any comments there?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't switched to a plant-based diet. I have a daughter who's a celiac, and we are looking at alternatives into sorry, I just lost my train of thought because I can hear my family out in the backyard. I'm sorry.
They look like they've got a great fire pit going on at the back there though, Robin.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm coming over.
Yes,
oh no, I can't.
Conversation as well, and it's really quite distracting.
I know.
Kim, we're going to probably bring this conversation to a close in a few minutes. I wonder if there's any other comments from the various other folks who are still online. Anybody like to put their hand up? Any other things that they'd like to put into the conversation? There's a Helen Tilbury, always a woman with a comment to have. So Helen, tell us what's your thoughts on all of this?
Well, I was just wondering whether there's a way in terms of the post-COVID period of grabbing hold of what I see amongst a lot of my friends. So I'm not maybe talking about the people in the northern suburbs, but hopefully it's happening there too, where we've all had to go back to cooking a lot more of our food ourselves. Yes, it's great to support takeout, but on a general daily basis, we're cooking everything. And I find for me and for many of my friends, there's there's a desire to, I've had friends deliver bread and butter pudding. I mean, who has ever eaten bread and butter pudding in the last 10 years? And maybe you never want to, but there's that sense of going back to basics. And I've noticed it in myself. I've always been a keen gardener, but I tend to go and buy my seedlings. And now, I don't know if I'm just going mad or something, and I'm different from other people, but I'm collecting seeds from my plants so that I will grow from scratch. And I'm just wondering whether we can, whether it's at the university level or at the grassroots, northern suburbs, community level, or what Dee was talking about, try and in this period when we come out of COVID, how do we hold on to that, hold on to the basics?
Helen, I'd like to talk a little bit about this in terms of what we're discovering is a value for the things we have to hand and a desire to eliminate waste. And that's a really positive step, because what the lockdown has done is forced us to really get creative with everything we have in our pantries, in our fridges. And we're starting to think, what was that recipe that my mother or my grandmother used to do? Like, I've been collecting all the ends of bread, you know, buying my bread from Bread and Butter every couple of days, but collecting all the ends of bread so I can make bread and butter pudding on Sunday to go with everything else that I'm going to make as potluck dinner tonight. But I think the thing we want to try and capture and provide opportunity for is places like Design Tasmania, the Harvest Market, the university, the Northern Suburbs community groups, everywhere is about programming, and particularly in our artistic programming, where we've had to shift everything to thinking about delivering online. And then when we reopen, what we'll be doing is working on a series of community workshops that are inviting people in to experience the process of making and demystify some of that stuff, so that you can see why a master maker or an artisan, and when I say artisan, I talk about food producers as well, understand that what they're doing requires talent, skill, ability, practice, thousands of hours to master your craft, but that you can learn a little bit about that, take it home and practice it yourself.
And on that note, perfect interjection. If you want to be able to sign up for our newsletter for Ferment Tasmania, just go onto our Facebook page and sign up, please. We do have fabulous international fermentation experts like Sandor Katz, who has put his hand up to be able to do online maker sessions, to do krauts and things like that into the future. So please make sure you do that, and then you can be abreast of all the fantastic things you can do. You'll have to BYO your own cabbage at this point in time in a bowl, but other than that, it'll be quite exciting. And the other thing I need to mention is Launceston's Greatest Regional Cities Challenge. Ferment Tasmania, or not, sorry, sorry.
Video Gastronomy Network.
Put another hat on, Kim.
The UNESCO Creative Cities bid for City of Gastronomy is number 42. If we could have a few votes for number 42 on the Greater Regional Cities Challenge, that would be much appreciated, because we would really like to be able to get the funding up to be able to create an incredible bid that the UNESCO Creative Cities team could not say no to.
And it's anyway, the answer to life, the universe, and everything.
Yes.
So number 42.
Number 42. Oh, and it's all yours.
Good. Look, thanks everybody. What a fascinating conversation it's been, and isn't it exciting that Launceston is not saying, you know, we do it pretty well here in Australia, but we could be the creative city for gastronomy for the whole of the world. And that's the thinking that I love to see, that we aren't just a small part of a small state, of a small country. We are who we are in a connected world, and this online festival, I think, proves that. We've now got people zooming in and watching movies from all around Australia, and I can see that our food culture is going to be stronger as a result of the fabulous women that we've been listening to tonight. So please put your hands together and say thank you for Fermentation Tasmania and all these other wonderful folks.
And thank you, ladies, for joining us. And thank you, Karina, very much. And B, thank you very much for joining us too. Karina's our CEO of Ferment Tasmania, and she's doing an incredible job in isolation with a 3-year-old attached to her ankle. I got to give her credit. Thank you.
And we'll put this conversation up on the internet next to Soufra, hopefully in the next 24 hours.
And just before we tie that,
yes,
yes, let's eat and drink.
I just wonder, because I'm new to Zoom, I see there are a lot of people who are on the Zoom.
If anybody wants to stay on and ask a question, I know Christine had a question. Girls, if you can stay on for a couple more minutes, we can just answer a few questions.
Yeah, there's still martini left. I'm right.
My tea's gotten cold. It's not entertaining anymore. Christine?
My question's a really quick one. I did put it on the chat, but I noticed from the film website that there's a cookbook.
Yes.
And I wondered if anyone knew or knows how that can be obtained.
Well, we actually showed Soufra at BOFA last year. Petcock very kindly got a number of the cookbooks in.
It's still in it, and it's rich.
As did Phil down at Hobart.
But if, if you're desperate for one and you can't find one, I've got one.
I'll come into you.
Okay.
Google Soufra, and they will send you one. They'd love to send you one.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
And we can donate.
Right. Well, I'll track one down. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for
And
Christine.
thank you for the session.
Thank you very much, Christine. Any other questions?
I had a quick one. Is there anyone within the network that's doing sort of picking up the things that Urban Farming Tasmania used to do? Seedlings going out to disadvantaged areas, seed bank, apart from Permaculture Tasmania. I know they're doing a little bit of seed banking at the moment, but Urban Farming Tasmania used to have a community source seed bank.
I know there is one at Earthy Eats on Kingsway.
That's the old Urban Farming Tasmania one. So that's the remnants of the Urban Farming Tasmania.
Sandy, do you know of any other ones?
Not really, no. I know Joe Dean was trying to get something off the ground at Northern Suburbs Community Centre, but no, nothing as broad as what Urban Farming Tas was doing. That was quite extraordinary.
Yeah.
And
since Bridget Watts and all the teams moved, and you were part of that, weren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, so no, it needs to be reignited, I reckon.
DNA, it's your project.
Actually, I was just thinking about this. There's the City of Launceston's cultural strategy is out for public comment, and I think that you could potentially put in a comment or a mention around community connection through those sorts of things. That might be something you can go, hey, have you thought about? Because there's some different elements within that strategy that would align quite nicely with that.
Yeah. And sorry, Jude, you had a question?
A Bronze Strange, I think, had a question there. Have you got something?
Okay.
Did she say Jude?
Yeah.
Did you have a question, Jude?
No, it's good.
Bron, what have you got?
No, I don't really have a question. I just made a comment about how everyone was getting into doing their sourdough. And I just heard something that was quite funny that said it was a Tamagotchi for people over 30.
Yeah.
Sort of feed it, take care of it and look after it and you know.
Feed it and burp it.
I think it's a wonderful thing because I'm a chef by trade, and I started off many years ago. I was actually selling sourdough bread at the Brim Creek Farmers Market. I was one of the founding committee members. I actually was the treasurer for the Brim Creek Farmers Market, and my little thing was making sourdough bread. So I kind of can understand and relate to the fact that you have to kind of nurse and take care of your little starter all the time, and if you neglect it, that it can go terribly wrong very quickly. So yeah, that was just something that I noticed, and I thought everyone might get a bit of a giggle out of that one.
Perfect. And our tagline for fermentation is fermentation to transform, or Ferment Tasmania is fermentation transform. You know, it does transform things. But as you said, you do have to do it very carefully.
That's right. That's right. So yes, I've definitely got my sourdough going again at the moment, as everyone else has, and you know.
Now you need to get your kefir and your kombucha and.
Yes, I've got my cider going downstairs as well, so it's all kind of happening at the moment.
Oh, that's who you have to talk to Karina about that.
Yes.
Francesca, I'd love you to say a few words from your experience in France about all of the things that we're talking about here. Francesca, can you speak? You need to unmute yourself.
Yes, hi everybody. I'm no expert by any means. I've been back in Tasmania for a couple of years after having lived in France for, oh gosh, almost 30 years, I suppose. It's been a long time. And it is quite stunning to come back to Tasmania and to see everything that is going on in terms of the food culture. I was just wanting to maybe just touch on something that was said earlier on about, you know, there's this disparity between the haves and the have-nots and the cans and the can'ts, with you know, the economics of buying local. For the moment, it is out of a lot of people's reach. Yeah. And what can we do about that? I mean, apart from growing your own, you know, Harvest Market is a gorgeous place. It's wonderful. It's fabulous. But for the average person that I talk to, say it's a bourgeois enterprise and we can't afford the fruit and veg, we're going to go to Coles or we're going to go to, you know, Young's because we can buy more in bulk or whatever. So there's something, I suppose, that's intrinsically wrong in the fact that we have become used to more and more for less and less, and that's part of this whole global thing. Now we're talking about more and more local. How can we make it so that the local really is cheaper? Because for the moment, local is synonymous with, it seems to be for the most part, synonymous with more exclusive in some senses, because it's local, organic, higher quality, much nicer. Of course, everybody wants it. But what are the actual economics of bringing it down to a reasonable level where we can all afford it and it's not just a luxury?
Well, and Frank, this is what I was talking about beforehand. You know, if you actually go and get meat from real beef, you'll be paying less than any supermarket or butcher.
Yeah, yeah. Mm.
You know, the apples are going to be cheaper. The potatoes are going to be cheaper. It's just a matter of fossicking through and finding those cheaper. And unfortunately, we don't have the down signs.
Yeah.
To show the and the big orange. You know, this is a special sign. So it's almost a cultural change, and our supermarkets have done such a good job at training us.
Yes, I know, yeah.
To just walk and look for those headline signs and actually using our brains and figuring out what's cheaper and figuring out what's better. You know, if there's a big bunch of broccoli that was just picked yesterday, it's going to last in your fridge for at least a month, if not more. And take it from me, it has. As opposed to the supermarket stuff that you really get a week out of.
So, but just sorry, can I just no, just coming back, because my French experience is I would just get everything from the local markets, and it was all fresh and it was cheaper. Generally, I didn't have to hunt for bargains because the local is just that way. So I suppose it's a question of supply and demand here, that it's still we are on a smaller scale here, I suppose, for that.
It is smaller, and when you're looking at things like the wines and the olive oils and things like that, because it is so much smaller scale, it will be more expensive. The wines we're just not getting because we're cool climate. The risk is higher, the yield is smaller. And actually, for the value for money, Tasmanian wines probably beats any in the country, just because of the quality that we produce. And because they've actually consciously kept the price relatively low to keep it accessible for the local community. And this is not your everyday quaffing wine, but there are some you know, $20, $25 bottles of Tasmanian Pinot and Riesling, which are really bloody good. So, you know, again, not all of them across the board are going to be cheaper. and you have to find the ones that can fit your budget. We've been trying to dispel the myth that harvest is this sort of bourgeois, chichi, over-the-top market, because yes, we do have truffles there occasionally because we've got a fabulous truffle farm up the road, and we want it to be part of our winter culture. But we've also got really cheap and cheerful sausages. We've got some of the most incredible bread, you know, beautiful sourdough, much like what Braun used to create. And rather than having a really tacky white loaf that has no nutrition, and you end up eating 5 slices of it with Vegemite on it, you know, maybe 2 nice slices of a beautiful sourdough, and you still, because there's that conundrum as well. You're having people gaining so much weight because they're consuming so much crap, dare I say, and how do you get them appreciating eating a smaller amount of really good stuff to be really healthy? It is going to be a huge mindset change, because we're caught in a nexus between that European philosophy and that industrialized North American philosophy too. Any suggestions, Braun, on other woods? Because there will be things that are just more expensive because you can't produce them as cheaply down here.
It would seem to be the ideal moment, though, isn't it? It's like everyone's getting back to basics and wanting to do stuff themselves. And it's the time element, because if you go to 3 different individual markets to get your fish, to get your vegetables, to get your whatever, it takes a lot more time than just shopping under one roof, obviously. So that's the other thing that we do have a little bit more of maybe at the moment. Not necessarily everybody, but it's that slow movement, I suppose, too. It's that different way of approaching things, saying it's worth putting this little bit of extra time in to get that little extra bit of value and quality out of it.
And let's hope we stay on that slow track, because not only are we cooking slow food and doing all those fabulous slow braises and things like that, we're actually taking a deep breath. I've actually been able to figure out things on my computer that I haven't been able to figure out for years, because I've had the time to look and figure it out. And I've still got a lot of balls in the air, but I'm just getting a little bit of headspace every now and then that I can actually do a little bit more. I really hope it's a cultural change.
Can I just jump in with a solution?
Go for it.
This is a male solution. I don't do much cooking, so Helen will probably shut it down.
Helen, you pay attention.
What's for dinner is his favourite remark. Yes, carry on.
But it seems to me that it's there's an old phrase that I like, which is awanio, as well as not instead of. And it seems to me that if we've learnt one thing from COVID, is that the supermarkets have now geared themselves up to do home delivery so much better. And I've always thought that the smart homemaker, cook or whatever, would get the basics from the low-cost supermarket, because you can't beat that sort of economy of scale that they're doing, and then buy the specialty stuff from the harvest markets and so on, because quality actually adds that little je ne sais quoi to the whole meal, and also makes you feel that you're supporting local producers, and also just tastes so much better. So let's not say it's either supermarket or harvest market. Let's just say get them to deliver, and also I'll go down and have a delightful day at Saturday, wandering around meeting friends and buying nice stuff.
Sandy here. I wanted to bust a myth, but also I know Jude wants to say something as well. We know that Coles and Woolies fruit and veg is actually more expensive by 20 to 30% than Young's, Veggie Shed, or any of the other fruit and veg shops around Tasmania, and not that there's that many of them. So I did a pricing comparison a couple of years ago, and even today they're more expensive, but you know, they've got the one-stop shopping. Once you're in there and you buy everything all at once. So that slow shopping, as Frank was just talking about, is certainly a way to go. But what's really interesting then is moving forward, there's a huge opportunity for a local fruit and veg aggregator, such as a fruit and veg hub or something like that, whether it be virtual, similar to what obviously what Harvest is doing, but bringing all the local foods together So it's much easier to get access to it. But yeah, so Coles and Woolies fruit and veg are not necessarily cheaper, interestingly enough. But yeah, very easy to get everything you want all at the same time. Sorry, Jude, you had something to say.
Oh, I have to take myself off of mute, do I?
No, you're fine.
Okay.
I've wondered in the COVID, in what's happening. It's on our local economy, as they talk about it on the stock market as being a correction. I think as we went globally 20 years ago, the globalisation and the exports that we do of that, and the amazing, beautiful products that we have down here, and none of us know what's going to happen. I sort of follow some different things, and I look sort of what's happening politically around the world as all the countries are now closing down and doing this for a time, whether we get back to before or whether we don't. I wonder if there'll be a correction in you know, because there is, I think, Frank, I resonated with you when you were talking about in some of the markets I know in Europe and Melbourne and Sydney, like it's cheaper to go to, but our markets are definitely the product, because of the product and the produce, and definitely, Kim, I agree, you know, expensive because we do it on a small scale, but there's a lot of those products that have been exported to the demand of China and whatnot. And for the moment, those things aren't happening. So like for our crayfish, for instance, was kind of like, wow, we don't have that market. What are we going to do? Well, we'll have to sell it to local. There's just got to be some massive changes, I think, where there will just be a correction like it does on the stock market. And I think we'll all be okay. And I think we're in a beautiful position down. Yeah, I just wonder if there's a correction going on. Mother Earth's time.
We've got a couple of restaurants as well, and when I saw the price for rock lobster going down, I actually talked to my chef Craig, and I said, "Okay, let's get it on the menu." We can't afford to otherwise. It's just too expensive. Abalone, I think it's my favorite seafood on the planet. And to parboil it and stick it in a tin and send it off overseas just makes my heart cry.
Yeah.
And I know the only reason I can actually enjoy it is because my dear husband dives. And so he'll just come off the rock and get some for me. And we have a recreational license.
So I wonder if those days, if I know there's certain times of the year I make a vegetarian, I make a lot of spanakopita, and we grow our own silver beet and whatnot. And the times that it doesn't grow, I go to Coles and I get the frozen, but for 99 cents a little box, and it's grown in Australia, exported to China, frozen and boxed in there, and then sent back to us. And I just think, fuck, I'm just not going to do spanakopita in those times when I'm not growing it. So here we go back to using what's available that's growing in our seasons, which I think is really healthy for your body.
Jude, good on you. And it's what I did when we got involved in the farmers market. In fact, all the girls that helped put that farmers market together, was hilarious because we kept running out of toilet paper. We weren't going to the supermarket, and we didn't hoard in those days. But we learned how to eat seasonally again, and we learned, and you know, all of a sudden it's getting a bit cooler. We were about to go into COVID, and the first thing I did was ask for the guys from Real Beef for some ossobuco, so I could do a really beautiful slow cooked ossobuco. And to me, that's the beginning of winter. And you know, to come home and have those beautiful smells coming out of the oven is just beautiful. And it's those simple things that we have to enjoy again.
And that's good for our heart and our soul and our mental health. And so we'll keep our immunity up rather than trying to source a pawpaw. You know, my partner just got obsessive about pawpaws every day. And I go, well, you know, like, just, it's not the season for it. We don't grow it down here anyway, but still, where's it coming from? I know with ginger, you know, we eat a lot of ginger. It's $45 a kilo at the minute. I spent $10 for a bit of, you know, maybe we can start trying to grow it inside. And
I buy a fair bit of it when it's cheap and it's fresh, and I freeze it.
Yeah, okay.
I know it's not as good, but it's always there. It doesn't go rotten in your cool store, and it grates really nicely with a good microplane.
Yeah, okay.
Can I add a comment here too?
Yeah.
Just to answer Jude's comment, I think what you're going to see happen, and my whole career has been working in the food industry around the world, and I've done it from, you know, my own business or a couple of people to multinationals. I think what you're going to see reset after this, which goes to what you're talking about, is not so much our markets or not exporting, but you're going to see people having a good hard look at our supply chains. Yes. And that's going to happen not just in food, that's going to happen to everything, because the issue isn't if we're export versus local. The issue is the way our society is set up at the moment. Sometimes products go through, you know, 7, 10, 15 different people to get from the producer to the person cooking it. And that even includes that are products made in Tasmania that have to be sent somewhere else to go to distribution centres to come back to a shop. So I think out of this, what you're going to start to see in that space is a lot of people discussing how do we shorten supply chains, how do we make them more efficient? And in food, that makes me excited, because hopefully that will make it cheaper. It'll make it better for the environment with less transport, and it will make the food taste better as well.
Absolutely. So maybe out of the COVID comes this wonderful thing where we've gone from this expansion to contraction. We're still all going to be okay, and that we should be grateful and really lucky in the place that we live in. So it has gone like that, and then there's this, and you know. Anyway, yeah. Well, wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else from everybody else? No. Oh, and thank you very much for the opportunity. Robin, Sandy, and Claire, thank you so much for giving up your afternoon and joining us. Claire, I hope the hangover tomorrow is not too bad.
Very well behaved, thank you. I'm a creative. Our livers are twice the size of your normal humans.
And this is what I love about, you know, not only are the different facets of the food system connecting really well now, it's really nice to pull that design element in and really create a wonderful holistic look at what Tasmania could be going forward.
Yeah, that's what we're here to do.
Anyway, thank you, everybody. Has everybody been happy with responses to questions? I have tried to glance over occasionally, but okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, everybody. Enjoy BOFA.
We'll be up on BOFA, hopefully not too long.
Excellent. Thank you, sweetheart.
Go to Soufra, and you'll see it there. Cheers. Good night.
Thanks.
Bye.
Don't forget to sign